Imagine the most powerful republic in the world collapsing in a single generation. 5 centuries of stability gone in 50 years. 50 years. That's all it took for the Roman Republic to die and the Roman Empire to be born. 5 decades of civil war, political murder, and power struggles. 23 stab wounds. March 15th, 44 BCE. Rome's greatest general, stabbed by his own colleagues. They thought they were saving the Republic. Instead, they guaranteed its destruction. Out of the chaos, one teenager would play a 50-year game of political chess so masterfully that he'd transform Rome forever. His name was Octavian. You know him as Caesar Augustus, the first Roman emperor. By 100 BCE, Rome controlled the entire Mediterranean, what they called Mare Nostrum, our sea. But Rome itself? Still technically a republic. 2 consuls, a senate, popular assemblies, checks and balances, 2,000 years before America. But the system was cracking. Rome's conquests made some citizens obscenely wealthy while others starved. The army transformed from citizen soldiers into professional troops, loyal to generals who paid them, not to Rome. In 82 BCE, General Sulla marched his legions on Rome, the first commander to ever do so, and declared himself dictator. He purged enemies through prescriptions, death lists posted in the Forum, over 4,000 Roman citizens executed. The message was clear. Military power now trumped political tradition. By 60 BCE, 3 men dominated Rome. Pompey the Great, celebrated general, Marcus Licinius Crassus, possibly history's richest man, and Julius Caesar, ambitious, brilliant, drowning in debt. They formed the first triumvirate, an unofficial alliance to dominate politics. Caesar got command of Roman forces in Gaul. Over 8 years, he'd conquer all of modern France, Belgium, and parts of Germany and Britain. 1 million killed, 1 million enslaved. When Germanic tribes threatened, Caesar built a bridge across the Rhine in 10 days, marched his army across, then destroyed the bridge behind him. The message: nowhere was beyond Rome's reach. Crassus, jealous of military glory, invaded Parthia in 53 BCE. It ended catastrophically. His army destroyed, Crassus killed, allegedly by molten gold poured down his throat. His head became a prop in a Parthian play. The same year, Caesar's daughter Julia, married to Pompey to seal their alliance, died in childbirth. The personal bond between Caesar and Pompey died with her. The triumvirate was down to 2 men, and Rome wasn't big enough for both. January 10th, 49 BCE. Caesar stood at the Rubicon. By law, no general could bring his army into Italy. Crossing meant treason, punishable by death. Caesar made his choice. Alea iacta est. The die is cast. He spurred his horse forward. In that moment, the Republic's fate was sealed. Civil war had begun. City after city opened their gates to Caesar. Pompey and the Senate fled to Greece, where Pompey could raise armies from Rome's eastern provinces. The decisive battle came at Pharsalus. Caesar had 22,000 troops. Pompey commanded 47,000. But Caesar held back a reserve line to counter Pompey's cavalry. When they charged, Caesar's troops aimed spears at riders' faces. Pompey's aristocratic cavalry broke and fled rather than risk disfigurement. Pompey fled to Egypt. Egypt's boy king didn't want to anger Caesar. As Pompey stepped onto Egyptian soil, he was stabbed in the back. He died on a beach before his wife and son. His severed head was sent to Caesar as a gift. Egypt held Cleopatra, brilliant, multilingual, desperate for her throne. Their alliance was political and romantic. For months, Caesar sailed the Nile with her on a golden barge, a preview of imperial luxury to come. By 45 BCE, Caesar had won. He celebrated 4 triumphs in a single month. The message was unmistakable. Caesar was Rome's master. Caesar now held unprecedented power, dictator for life. He implemented reforms, the Julian calendar, land redistribution, citizenship expansion. But the Senate was now a rubber stamp. Caesar appointed senators himself, including Gauls, who barely spoke Latin. To traditional Romans, this was sacrilege. The conspiracy included Rome's noblest names. Marcus Brutus, Caesar's protege, possibly his son, joined despite Caesar's trust. They called themselves the Liberators. Their plan: assassinate Caesar before he left for a Parthian campaign. March 15th, 44 BCE, the Ides of March. A soothsayer had warned, "Beware the Ides of March." Caesar joked that morning, "The Ides have come." The soothsayer replied, "Aye, but not gone." Casca struck first. Caesar fought back, stabbing Casca's arm with his stylus. But then others closed in. 23 wounds. Caesar fought until he saw Brutus. "Kai su teknon, you too, child." He stopped fighting, pulling his toga over his head, preserving dignity in death. Caesar collapsed at the base of Pompey's statue. The conqueror of Gaul bled out on the Senate floor. The liberators had succeeded in killing the tyrant, but they'd failed at everything else. While Rome erupted, an 18-year-old studied in Greece, Gaius Octavius. Caesar's will named him primary heir, not just of fortune, but of name. Everyone told Octavian to refuse. It was a death sentence. He had no military experience, no army. Octavian ignored them. He sailed for Italy immediately. In Rome, Antony's funeral oration turned public opinion. Holding Caesar's bloody toga, showing every wound, Antony sparked riots. The liberators fled to the east. Antony dismissed Octavian as a boy, but Caesar's fortune let Octavian pay the legacy Caesar promised every citizen. Suddenly, the teenager was Rome's most popular politician. Veterans saw him as their general's rightful heir. Within months, Octavian had an army, through loyalty to a dead man's memory. In 43 BCE, Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus formed the Second Triumvirate, official and legal. Their first act, a purge. 2,000 citizens condemned. This was fundraising. They needed money for armies. Among victims, Cicero, Rome's greatest orator, his head and hands nailed to the forum as warning. In 42 BCE came Philippi, the Republic's last stand. Brutus and Cassius had 19 legions. The battle came in two phases. Cassius, seeing his camp burn, committed suicide, not knowing Brutus had won his sector. 3 weeks later, Antony forced a second battle. Brutus's army was destroyed. Brutus threw himself on his sword. With his death, the Roman Republic died too. The Senate would still meet, consuls would still be elected, but it was theater. Real power belonged to men with armies. After Philippi, they divided the world. Antony took the wealthy east. Octavian got exhausted Italy. In 41 BCE, Antony summoned Cleopatra to Tarsus. She arrived on a golden barge with purple sails, dressed as Venus. For a decade, Antony became an Eastern monarch, living in Alexandria with Cleopatra. Meanwhile, Octavian remained in Rome, doing unglamorous governing, fighting pirates, settling veterans, rebuilding his image. It was boring. It was brilliant. Octavian won the propaganda war. He was the defender of Roman values. Antony was a corrupted Eastern despot under Cleopatra's spell. When Antony donated Roman territories to Cleopatra's children, Octavian had his ammunition. September 2nd, 31 BCE, Actium. The final showdown came at sea. Antony's fleet was massive but slow. Octavian's ships, commanded by Admiral Agrippa, were smaller and maneuverable. Hours of stalemate. Then Cleopatra's squadron raised sails and fled, and Antony followed her. Rome's great general abandoned his fleet mid-battle to chase his lover. Without their commander, Antony's fleet collapsed. By day's end, Octavian controlled the seas. Octavian pursued them to Egypt. On August 1st, 30 BCE, Antony fell on his sword. The wound wasn't immediately fatal. He was hauled up to Cleopatra's tomb by ropes. He died in her arms. 12 days later, Cleopatra chose death over being paraded in Octavian's triumph. Egypt's last pharaoh died August 12th. With their deaths, the civil wars ended. Octavian stood alone, the last man standing after 50 years of violence. He was 32 years old. Octavian returned to Rome in 29 BCE and celebrated 3 triumphs. He'd won the civil wars and controlled the entire Roman world. But he'd learned from Caesar's mistake. Blatant dictatorship got you 23 stab wounds. Octavian needed a different approach. January 13th, 27 BCE. In a carefully staged Senate meeting, Octavian announced he was returning all powers to the Senate. The civil wars were over. The Republic was restored. He was just a private citizen. It was political theater. The Senate, his supporters, reacted as planned. They begged him to stay. Only he could maintain peace. After much convincing, Octavian reluctantly accepted. The Senate went further. They granted him a new name, Augustus, the revered one. A title carrying religious connotations without claiming divinity. It positioned him above ordinary magistrates while maintaining republican forms. Over years, Augustus accumulated powers, each one technically traditional. Tribune's powers, consular imperium, high priest. But he never called himself emperor, never dissolved the Senate. Elections were still held. It was magnificent fiction, and he delivered results. After a century of civil wars, Rome had peace. The Pax Romana would last 2 centuries. By Augustus's death in 14 CE, the transformation was complete. The empire stretched from Britain to Egypt. 50 million people, 25% of the world's population. The Republic's chaotic freedom had given way to imperial order. 50 years, from 83 BCE, when Sulla marched on Rome, to 27 BCE, when Augustus accepted his title. The Roman Republic died, and the Roman Empire was born. It wasn't a single collapse. It was a slow-motion train wreck over 2 generations. Military strongmen discovering legions loyal to them were more powerful than institutions. Political violence normalized, the gap between rich and poor widening. Democracy giving way to demagoguery, then dictatorship, then dynasty. Sound familiar? The patterns that destroyed Rome's republic echo through history. When military power exceeds civilian authority, when opponents become enemies to destroy, when inequality makes the system seem rigged, when norms erode for strongman rule. Rome's death offers warnings for any democracy. Augustus succeeded where Caesar failed, not because he was less ruthless. His prescriptions killed more Romans. He succeeded because he understood presentation matters. Call yourself dictator, get 23 stab wounds. Call yourself first citizen, while maintaining republican forms, found a dynasty. From republic to empire in 50 years, from democracy to autocracy in 2 generations. Rome's transformation shaped Western civilization for 2 millennia. The question isn't whether it could happen again. History suggests it can happen anywhere. The question is, are we paying attention?